Hey there, fellow philosophy enthusiasts, ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. And today we have a thinker who's, well, he's truly a heavyweight in the history of philosophy.
Yeah, we're talking about Kumārila, a 7th century Indian philosopher. And wow, this guy, he's just got so much to offer, especially for those interested in like the really foundational stuff.
Oh, for sure. Epistemology, philosophy of language, even metaphysics. Kumārila, he really dove deep into it all.
And we're going to follow him down that rabbit hole, right?
Precisely. Using, of course, the excellent entry in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy as our guide.
Excellent choice. So what's the plan? Where are we focusing our philosophical lens today?
Well, we want to extract, like, the most philosophically juicy bits,
Yeah.
the things that'll really get our philosophical minds buzzing, the ideas that still have something to say to us today.
Love it. Let's get into it then. So Kumārila, 7th century India. What's the intellectual scene like at this time?
Imagine it's like this incredibly vibrant period. So many different philosophical schools, all interacting, debating, arguing. It's a real melting pot of
Oh,
ideas.
yeah, I remember reading about this. They were actually developing a whole shared vocabulary for philosophical discussion, right?
Exactly. They called it Pramahashastra, which is like the study of the sources of knowledge. Pretty cool, huh?
Very cool.
Yeah.
And this is all happening right alongside like huge developments in Buddhist thought too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Figures like Dignaga and Dharmakirti, they were systematizing Buddhist logic and epistemology in really sophisticated ways.
Hmm.
And, Kumārila, he was right there in the thick of it.
Yeah, there's that amazing story, right, about him studying at Nalanda, the great Buddhist university.
Oh, yeah. The story goes that he went there specifically to, like, master Buddhist philosophy so he could refute it more effectively.
Talk about knowing your enemy.
Right. It speaks to the level of philosophical engagement during that era. It was intense.
So where does Kumārila fit into all of this? What's his like philosophical home base?
So Kumārila was a leading figure in the Purva school.
Okay, Purva Mamasa. For those of us who, might need a refresher, what's the deal with that school of thought?
Sure, sure. Think of it this way. They're all about the Vedas, right? But their focus is really on the earlier parts, the Brahmanas, the sections dealing with ritual
But
practice.
they're like the ritual experts.
Exactly. And their whole philosophical project is driven by this need to, like, understand the Vedas, interpret them correctly, and figure out what they tell us about how to live, how to perform rituals, what our obligations are.
So that's how they differ from, say, the Vedanta school.
Right. Vedanta, they're more focused on the Upanishads, and they're big on metaphysics, the nature of reality, the self, all that jazz.
Okay, got it. So Kumārila, he's in the ritual camp, but he's also known for his work in epistemology, right?
Oh, yeah, big time. In fact, you could say his most important contribution to philosophy is his doctrine of svata pramaya.
Swata Pramaya. Okay, break that down for us. What does it mean?
Sure, so it basically means intrinsic validity. And what Kumārila is saying is that reliable ways of knowing, they are reliable in and of themselves. Like, they don't need some external stamp of approval.
Interesting. But wouldn't that, like, open the door to all sorts of crazy beliefs? If anything goes, how do we tell what's actually true?
Well, that's the challenge, right? And Kumārila, he was very aware of this. He tackles it head on by pointing out the problem of infinite regress.
Infinite regress. Go on.
Right. So think about it. If every belief needs some external justification, then that justification itself would need to be justified. And so on, forever. You'd never actually get anywhere.
Ah, I see. So we have to have some kind of starting point, a foundation of beliefs we can trust without constantly needing to prove them.
Exactly. And for Kumārila, that foundation is the intrinsic validity of our reliable cognitive faculties.
Okay, I'm starting to see where he's coming from. But hold on, how does this square with, like, the possibility of error? We all make mistakes, right?
Of course. And Kumārila accounts for this by saying that, look, a belief that appears valid, we take it as valid until we have a specific reason to doubt it. It's like innocent until proven guilty.
So it's not about constantly questioning everything, but rather about being open to revision when new evidence comes along.
Precisely. And this whole idea, it actually resonates with some pretty major trends in contemporary epistemology.
Really? Like what?
Well, think about common sense realism. Philosophers like Thomas Reid, they argue that we're justified in trusting our basic cognitive abilities unless we encounter specific reasons to doubt them. It's very much in line with Kumārila's thinking.
Wow, that's a fascinating connection. So Kumārila, he's not just some historical figure. His ideas are still relevant today.
Absolutely. And it gets even more interesting when you look at how he engages with other schools of thought, like Buddhism.
Oh yeah, the Buddhists had their own take on epistemology, right?
Yeah, they did. They had this idea of svasiviti, which basically means self-awareness. They thought that consciousness is inherently aware of itself, and this provided like an internal justification for our experiences.
So for them, it was all about looking inwards.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
But Kumārila, he wasn't buying it. He argued that we're directly aware of the world around us, not just our own internal states.
So when I see a tree, I'm actually seeing the tree, not just some mental representation of a tree.
That's right. Kumārila was a staunch realist, and he saw this Buddhist focus on self-awareness as an unnecessary complication.
Okay, I'm following. So we've got intrinsic validity, we've got realism. What else is going on in Kumārila's philosophical world?
Well, we can't talk about Kumārila without talking about his views on language. And this is where things get really, really interesting.
Lay it on me.
Okay, so Kumārila and the Mimamsa school in general, they believe that the Vedas and language itself are eternal and impersonal. They called it akaparuya.
Eternal, like forever.
Forever. No beginning, no end. Not created by humans or gods. It's a pretty radical idea.
It is radical. How did they justify that?
Kumārila had some pretty compelling arguments against the idea that language has a conventional origin. He basically said, look, imagine someone trying to establish the first linguistic convention.
Like someone pointing at a tree and saying, let's call this tree.
Right. But to even do that, they would need to already have a shared understanding of what it means to signify, to refer to something. So the very act of creating a convention presupposes a prior understanding of language.
Whoa, mind blown. So language can't come from nothing. It has to be like built in somehow.
That's the gist of it. And this idea, it has some surprising connections to, believe it or not, Wittgenstein.
Wittgenstein, the 20th century philosopher.
Yep. In his philosophical investigations, Wittgenstein critiques Augustine's picture of language acquisition in a very similar way. He argues that you can't just point and name things without a pre-existing framework of meaning.
Okay, that is wild. So Kumārila's ideas, they're reaching across centuries and continents.
They really are, and his theory of meaning, it gets even more fascinating.
I'm all ears.
So Kumārila held a view called Apihitan Vayavada. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the basic idea is that the meaning of a sentence, it's built up from the individual meanings of the words. Like each word has its own inherent meaning, and then we combine those meanings to understand the sentence.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like putting together a puzzle, right?
Exactly. But there were other theories out there, like the Smoth theory, which argued that the meaning of a sentence is this, like indivisible whole. And Prabhakara, another Mimamsa thinker, he had a view called Anvitabhihanavada, which emphasized the role of the sentence in determining word meanings. But Kumārila, he stuck to his guns. He thought words have independent meanings, and sentences are built from those.
And this connects to his realism about universals. Duh.
You got it. Kumārila believed that when we perceive something, we grasp not just its particular features, but also its universal properties. So like, when I see a cow, I'm not just seeing this individual cow, I'm also grasping the concept of cowness, which exists independently in reality.
So for him, universals aren't just mental constructs, they're real things.
Real things. And this led him to critique other theories of universals, like the Nyaya school's idea of inherence. Kumārila thought that universals and particulars, they are distinct but intrinsically related aspects of reality.
Okay, this is getting pretty deep, but I'm with you so far.
Good. Now let's talk about arthapati.
Arthapati, that's a new one.
It's basically like inference to the best explanation. It's this idea that we can arrive at knowledge by postulating something that explains an otherwise puzzling fact.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure. Imagine you see someone who's really fat, but you never see them eat during the day. What do you conclude?
That they must be eating a ton at night.
Exactly, that's arthapati. And Kumārila used this type of reasoning in a lot of his arguments, including his defense of the reality of universals.
I see. He's saying, look, we use general terms all the time. We talk about cows, trees, humans. That wouldn't be possible if universals didn't actually exist.
Exactly. We need something real for those terms to refer to.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've covered a lot of ground. Epistemology, language, universals. What about the self? Where does Kumārila stand on that?
Well, as you might expect, he had some pretty strong views on that too. And of course, he had to grapple with the Buddhist perspective on the self, which was, to put it mildly, different from his own.
Right. The Buddhists didn't exactly believe in a permanent, unchanging self, did they?
Nope, not at all. They saw the self as impermanent, constantly changing. But Kumārila, he was a firm believer in an enduring self, an Atman.
And how did he argue for that?
Well, one of his key arguments relied on memory. He said, look, when we remember something, we experience it as our own memory. There's this inherent I reference. And that, he argued, points to a continuous self that was present in the past and is present now, remembering.
Okay, so the continuity of our memories, that's his evidence for a persistent self.
Exactly. He thought it was pretty strong evidence against the Buddhist view of the self as constantly changing.
Fascinating. Okay, I think we have time for one more big Kumārila idea.
All right, let's talk about apurva.
Apurva, I have no idea what that is.
It's a unique concept. It was developed by the Masakas to explain how Vedic rituals, which are performed at a specific time, can have effects that manifest much later, even in future lives.
Okay, that sounds tricky. How does that work?
Right, so they came up with this idea of apurva. It's like this unseen force or potentiality that's generated by the performance of a ritual. And this apurva, it kind of hangs out in the background, so to speak, and eventually brings about the promised result.
So it's like a time-delayed causal mechanism.
Yeah, you could think of it that way. And this was really important for the Masakas because the Vedas, they often promise future rewards for performing rituals. Like you do this ritual and you'll go to heaven.
So apurva was a way of explaining how that was possible, even if you don't see the results right away.
Exactly. It was their way of making sense of the efficacy of Vedic rituals within their broader philosophical system.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Kumárila's ideas on epistemology, language, the self, even the nature of ritual action.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear that this guy was a deep thinker, engaging with some really fundamental philosophical questions.
He really was. And what's amazing is how relevant his work still is today. Like his ideas about justification, they speak directly to contemporary debates in epistemology. His arguments for the eternality of language, they raise questions about the nature of meaning and the relationship between language and thought. And his whole approach to the self, it offers a unique perspective on consciousness and personal identity.
Absolutely. He's a philosopher's philosopher, someone whose ideas deserve to be studied and debated, even centuries later.
For sure. And we hope that this deep dive has inspired you, our listeners, to maybe explore Kumārila's work a little further. There's a whole world of philosophical insight waiting to be discovered there.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So until next time, keep those philosophical gears turning, folks.